So our next speaker is Shaowen Wang, who is a professor and head of the Department of Geography and Geographic Information Sciences at Illinois. He has served as the founding director of the CyberGIS Center for Advanced Digital and Spatial Studies since 2013. He was also, for a time from 2010 to 2017, the associate director of NCSA for CyberGIS. His research interests include geographic information science and systems, advanced cyber infrastructure and cyber GIS, complex environmental and geospatial problems, high performance and distributed computing, and spatial analysis and modeling. He served as the PI for several multi-institution projects sponsored by NSF for establishing the interdisciplinary field of cyber GIS and its application to a variety of domains. Today, he's going to give us a talk on exploring the frontiers of geospatial data science in the era of AI and cyber GIS. Shaowen?
Thanks very much, Judy. Can you hear me? Good, I see your smile. I interpret that as yes. Thanks for inviting me to give this talk. This is a very interesting workshop, and I understand you are pursuing also very exciting initiative. As Judy said, I'm going to be presenting this topic of exploring the frontiers of geospatial data science in the era of AI and cyber GIS. Going to share four knowledge tiers from this slide. On the left, you see from the top computation data intensive applications and sciences, and going down to geospatial data science. And also from bottom up, more of a technology-driven view from advanced computing and cyber infrastructure to cyber GIS. And on the right, I share some examples corresponding to these four knowledge domains. Very quickly on GIS, I understand this is quite a multidisciplinary community. As a short introduction, GIS stands for Geospatial Information Systems, and is also a branch of information science and certainly services. These days, nearly everyone's using GIS as services to get from point A to point B. And GIS has become also a fabric of our society and represents an important approach to data information synthesis. So among all these different interpretations and ramifications of GIS, an important note to mention here is that geo and spatial are spatial attributes inside of geospatial data and the GIS for us to take into account, both from how to handle the data and the computation, as well as how to make applications serve different purposes. And it's also a billion-dollar industry you saw from the right side of the previous slide. But stepping back in the history of science, including GIS-related scientific work, we see very dramatic shift from the conventional experiment observation theory approaches to now including AI, big data, and computation, and the loop involving all these different aspects of scientific practice. GIS is very much influenced and contributing to getting this loop closed. A quick example, since we're living in the sort of pandemic, COVID certainly 19 presented tremendous challenges. As an example here, you go to this sort of a science gateway interface representing information synthesis to address a number of questions focused on where. So we're curious about where COVID cases are and will likely be, and where vulnerable populations are, and so on, so forth. So the idea here is to just give you a quick connection to what GIS could do in terms of addressing these kinds of critical questions. And it's an ongoing project, and it also has a public interface from the previous slide at the top, where covid19.cigi.illinois.edu. So feel free to play with that application online. But behind this kinds of GIS applications is really the importance of geospatial big data when we are addressing geospatial big data from the big data popular notions of volume, velocity, variety, variability and veracity. All the popular ways you could imagine geospatial data has such characteristics, but from a critical lens of examining the characteristics of geospatial big data, number one, heterogeneous. So geospatial data coming from many application domains collected by very different sources. This is coming from satellites, as we heard from my my colleague earlier, Paul, discussing satellites, the power of remote sensing satellites, getting massive geospatial data, and certainly into very dynamic streams. Both spatial and temporal granularities could change. Such data are often massive, could cover the globe. I'm sure you learned that from Paul. But at the same time, at a fine granularity and increasingly at a finer granularity. Another aspect of geospatial data, a lot of times in social environmental applications, also have to do with privacy and confidentiality. Now you combine all these characteristics that gives geospatial data some very unique challenges, as well as a very significant value, not only tied to scientific work, but also societal impacts. Coming back to GIS, now we are in the era of CyberGIS, which is geospatial information science and systems based on advanced computing and cyber infrastructure. And why CyberGIS? If you are not familiar with the GIS really started to serve the purpose of cartographic mapping. So how do we turn maps, from paper forms into digital forms? That's really got GIS started. But today, GIS really serves many more purposes beyond cartographic mapping, to serve design purposes, design our environments, and certainly supporting scientific problem solving and decision making, addressing many questions as the World COVID-19 project I showed you at the beginning, and also personal services, mapping services, recommend restaurants for you as you get into locations you might not be familiar with. So now you look at all these different aspects of GIS. This has gone beyond the initial cartographic mapping context, and we see some increasingly clear trends. People certainly have gotten used to GIS as a mapping tool, but certainly GIS now becoming more equipped with understanding of processes associated with simulations. This is getting closer to the high performance computing world. And GIS for a long time has been really treated as a very crucial support for understanding quantitative information. But more recently, the combination of quantitative and qualitative information is also coming into play to serve increasing number of applications. And data, geospatial data, increasingly have temporal stamps and elements. So spatial is transforming into spatial and temporal, but even today's GIS and CyberGIS has not moved to have adequate support for spatial temporal data. And the space is a conventional framework for constructing GIS based on rigorous measurements. But more recently, understanding of place, for instance, folks even here understanding Urbana-Champaign. This is where University of Illinois, the flagship campus, is located. So my place understanding of Champaign-Urbana is certainly different from even many people on campus, their understanding of the place of Urbana-Champaign. So it's not necessarily rigid measurement-based representation, but rather also vague cultural, social understanding of our environment as a place. So as these are moving with more and more data behind these trends, we see the excitement of CyberGIS with a particular focus on data-intensive and computational problem-solving and decision-making embedded in a variety of research and education domains. And a recent book on the topic of CyberGIS touched upon different aspects of CyberGIS. You want to get a comprehensive view of the field, I would recommend this recent book. Now, coming back to my outline, I'll share with you a few examples from computation data intensive applications and sciences. So one example related to Paul was talking about in terms of remote sensing data. This is a particular type of remote sensing. It's called a LiDAR that could get high resolution topographic representation of our landscape. And USGS is a particular agency in the US to be responsible for the national topographic data. And the current generation is this three-dimensional elevation program is producing the national coverage based on LiDAR to derive terrain information, to derive hydrography information, and so on. So this is quite a serious undertaking. And when the program is finished, expectedly in the next 3 to 5 years, we will get petabytes of data representing fine resolution of topography. And just to give you a comparative understanding, the current generation of the National Elevation Data Program only has about half terabyte raw data. So practically, you could get that data into your personal GIS tools to do your analysis. Now we get to this program producing petabytes data representing topography. So it's now impossible to get such data completely into your personal computing environment to do the analysis you need. But there are a lot of analysis are dependent on this type of data. So the question is, how do we get the work done? So it's an important example related to that is, of course, an application if you want to map flood inundation. One of the holy grail challenges in geospatial data-related problems is you want to look at bigger scale, such as national scale or even global scale. And at the same time, you want to address fine scale details. And oftentimes, if you look at Google Map as example, you look at the globe, you will not be able to capture the local details, right? When you zoom in, you don't see the global context. So GIS oftentimes plays this balance to support different applications. But scientifically, a major desire to pursue is to cover both sides. You be able to look at the bigger scale at the same time look at the fine scale. So this is an example of doing flood inundation mapping at the national scale at the same time to address also local details to map out the flood inundation levels using digital elevation model at fine resolution derived from three-dimensional elevation program in the previous slide, but also river networks at the top left corner here representing river gauge measurements. There are about 2.7 million flow lines captured by the National Hydrography data set. So you combine these kinds of data, and also you run certain models, which is called height above nearest drainage, and you compute this. This is not something you would like to do with your personal GIS tools. It's impossible, and even use supercomputers, you really have to optimize the workflows to make this happen. We started this research direction over 5 years ago, and initially for completing this computation, it really needs multiple weeks, and then we managed to shrink the computing to a few hours in the end, but it's still quite a serious undertaking. So this research area was initiated by my colleague, Dr. David Maidman. So this is him giving a keynote talk at 2015 CyberGIS All Hands meeting at USGS. That was about the time when this research project was initiated, and he clearly saw the power of combining high-performance computing with the GIS with detailed geospatial data to inform some really exciting research frontiers. For instance, in this case, connecting GIS and hydrology for mapping flood inundation. So behind this very serious undertaking in terms of the kind of computing power involved and also detailed representations of topography is really the notion of science of geospatial data. We need a suite of spatial computational theories and methods to enable our geospatial representations for supporting the scientific work. So you could see geospatial data science is intersecting among three bubbles here, but in the middle is really CyberGIS, AI, and data science connecting these three bubbles from geospatial science and technologies, mathematical statistical sciences, and cyber infrastructure and computational sciences. I mean, the science of geospatial data is not that new. Geospatial data has been collected for decades, as long as even the history of GIS. But I think what's exciting and also challenging is how to combine the spatial domain knowledge with the computational sort of aspects. From the spatial side, we are oftentimes alerted to understand distribution patterns, spatial structural dependencies, and how do you integrate across scales and certainly spatial heterogeneity, and so on. And from the computational side, of course, I suppose if the folks here in this conference are familiar with the trade-off between uncertainty and validity, performance versus reliability, and the complexity versus intensity. So now if you establish this at scale to tackle the kind of problems I mentioned a few examples here so far, this is clearly very exciting frontiers of geospatial data science. A major strategy in geospatial data science, I suppose this is true for the field like astronomy, is you have this multi-layered representations of environment, and you cannot just fit this entirely into any single computer resource. Now the question is, how do you get different parts moved into appropriate computing resources and elements, and in the end still combine them holistically into your solution view? So that's the sort of general strategy of divide and conquer in geospatial data science that is a reasonable theoretical support for engaging high performance computing and AI approaches. So this slide gives you a little bit more technical view, also connecting a variety of domain science communities with advanced CI, and in the middle, CyberGIS really serve as a bridge with the different types of capabilities, including oftentimes this is overlooked in the field of GIS related domains. We tend to be dependent on very interactive exploration of data. And folks in my communities are not so fired up by submitting big computing jobs and waiting for coffee time or dinner time to get results back. This is very much dependent on exploration of data and interactive analytics to be able to pose hypotheses and questions that get answers quickly. But also multi-scale modeling and simulation is another very important aspect of capabilities. But the question, of course, for a particular domain problem, what today scientists are facing is from the top to the bottom, they need to really stitch together different capabilities. That's not an easy task to do. So we're facing this growing ecosystem of capabilities between the geospatial and the cyber infrastructure, and the domains happen to be enabled by CyberGIS. So the question is, how do we work to grow our communities, supposed to be multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary communities, to make this process much easier for solving scientific problems. So of course, the good news is always computing is advancing very rapidly, especially in the context of cyber infrastructure, democratizing the access to advanced computing. That certainly has taken place in the context of CyberGIS and geospatial data science. Multiple years ago, NSF funded a major research instrumentation grant to set up a CyberGIS supercomputer called ROGER, stands for Resourcing Open Geospatial Education and the Research. And this supercomputer really, at that time, it's a pretty small supercomputer by the standard of measuring supercomputing performance. On the other hand, this supercomputer had achieved the integration of interactive computing with conventional HPC and also with big data computing. When I say big data computing, this is very much connected to big data capabilities such as Hadoop and Spark beyond the traditional queuing system-based HPC approach. And of course, also in the context of GIS, cloud is a very major movement. Many capabilities are available as services, such as, for instance, mapping services. You see many applications are integrating mapping services through cloud support. So this supercomputer effectively integrates all these modalities together as a holistic environment for a variety of CyberGIS applications. This certainly was important to integrate the CyberGIS software. I mentioned in this slide you saw, including both the domain applications and the advanced cyber infrastructure capabilities. So now the ROGER CyberGIS supercomputer got virtualized because it's more serving as a service infrastructure or even a knowledge infrastructure for a variety of domains and communities. If you want to get to know more details about this infrastructure, it's more of an open framework. As new hardware will become available, such hardware gets integrated, refresh the existing old hardware in this environment. But the idea of integrating traditional high performance computing for simulation related work, big data computing for data intensive analytics, such as Hadoop and Spark, and also cloud computing, enabling interactive visual analytics. So all of this together with a common data environment facilitating fast data access is the gist of this supercomputer environment. And certainly the GPU components enable AI-based workloads, but because the data is shared across these different computing modalities, allows for the analytics, data handling, and simulation work, and visual analytics happening in a highly integrated fashion for high performance applications. Yeah, so I was going to say, if you want to know the specs of this system, you could go to the CyberGIS website, center's website, click research, there's infrastructure submenu. You would get to this page I'm showing you. So next topic is the CyberGIS itself. I mentioned earlier, really focused on integration, interoperability, and reproducibility at the scale. This was a diagram coming from publication a decade ago. At that time, GIS was still primarily a personal computing desktop tool. Very interestingly, in the past 10 years or so, CyberGIS basically has evolved to move GIS from personal computing to cyber infrastructure and to high performance and distributed computing. And through this movement, you see CyberGIS is equipped to integrate big data to knowledge transformation, high performance computing, visualization, visual analytics, and collaborative problem solving. And these aspects were not necessarily in the personal GIS computing context, but very quickly this are now become the new norm. Thanks to NSF, really helped speed up this transformation of CyberGIS, including a software project funded by NSF, including partner institutions, both from the academic, government, and also the industry side. These are the team members helped establish CyberGIS software ecosystem, including modalities such as Gateway, that's for non-GIS experts to benefit from CyberGIS capabilities, but also CyberGIS Toolkit is for GIS folks to develop scalable algorithms and tools, oftentimes open source for community to drive. So the most cutting edge building blocks of CyberGIS software, and the middleware is really the service component that allows for access to advanced cyber infrastructure resources to create CyberGIS applications. And at the top, we see a variety of geospatial applications out there that are dependent on these kinds of technical capabilities, but at the same time, if you put those technical capabilities as summarized as this slide does, you would see some amazing new applications. And we also see a global community fostered to evolve the CyberGIS software ecosystem, and these are the distribution of the CyberGIS Gateway users. It's an old map, still growing in different ways. But of course, you know, at the end of the day, what the excitement of CyberGIS is telling us is, you know, a variety of scientific frontiers. This was even at the time when CyberGIS was conceptualized, and also the new geospatial data science was promoted. A special feature from PNAS addressing the emergence of spatial cyber infrastructure. Why spatial is special in the broad ecosystem of cyber infrastructure, largely due to, in fact, geospatial data growth and becoming increasingly diverse and complex. So let me give you an example. This is an AI specific example. So if I would ask you, you know, whether this is a piece of wetland or forest, I think you might not have a very good answer just by looking at this remote sensing imagery from Landsat. But now, if I give you a slice of LiDAR scan for the same area, this is a LiDAR point cloud, you could see, for instance, potentially, this is a gap. This could be underneath the vegetation, possibly as a river channel. So the 3D structure on top of the traditional two-dimensional remote sensing imagery could get us much better grasp of the landscape types. That's really motivating this piece of work, using 3D convolutional neural network for land cover classification. So we are looking at southern county in the state of Illinois. That's a good area for testing out this approach because of the diversity of land cover types, you know, vegetation coming from forest and agricultural land, as well as some small urban areas. So what we need to come up with is a 3D structural representation to have the clouds, point clouds, well tuned. And of course, this is a simple technique to generate training samples by rotating these point clouds. But innovation from this work is to incorporate 3D structures in the deep learning pipe, and specifically, this is the workflow, how to incorporate, for instance, multiple grid structures into convolutional layers at the different stages. So the idea here is, again, coming to the beginning of my talk, I was emphasizing in order for AI approaches, and especially deep learning neural networks, to be able to effectively harness geospatial data, we actually have to innovate the architecture of such neural networks to be able to effectively represent spatial information. So this is a sort of an early attempt to sort out this important interface between the spatial representations and the neural network architecture. And the results are quite good across the board. I could tell you, for instance, at the bottom, using a benchmark, the classification here misclassified basically some vegetation water related features, but here through our convolutional neural network that incorporates the 3D structural information, we get it nearly right. Similarly, in other land cover types, you see also a superior, better performance. So why we did this? Now, for those of you who are familiar with land use science and GIS, you are certainly aware of this effort, National Land Cover Database, 2011, and it has actually new updated release. But the idea is to map out the land cover features across the country, and this is important for many different domains, and it's in fact a coordinated effort in the US across 10 different federal agencies to produce this data product. Right now, the average resolution for this particular city 2011 is 30 meters. Now, for the LiDAR-based topographic data set, the resolution there is every square meter you get on average 2-point coverage, and vertically that's under 10 centimeters resolution as accuracy. So we're really talking about the resolution improvement for mapping the land here in the US has a huge opportunity, but even for that single county mapping, it leads to dramatic computation data challenges, including data processing and feature extraction and training the model and ultimately classification. And using the CyberGIS supercomputer I was talking about, this takes about a week time if we booked the entire computer to do this exercise. Now, this is only a single county. I think the compelling case is we want to do the entire country through this methodology, AI methodology. My argument is we could perhaps keep some really significant AI-based high-performance computers busy for quite a while to achieve this kind of scientific work. It's not only just in the context of natural sciences, as you might have recognized, GIS and CyberGIS applied to solve social and environmental problems. In this case, related to the World COVID-19 project, we are mapping out human mobility to see the patterns of travels, which now folks understand has a lot to do with the containment and management mitigation of the spread of the virus of COVID-19. So again, this is very much dependent on geospatial data and how we analyze and interpret the results to support not only scientific work, but also decision-making. So the notion here is it's a data cube, right? You have both the geospatial aspects as well as the human aspects. And conventionally, this is not what GIS is good at. And it's also not what GIS is good at in terms of the scale we're now thinking to resolve for this global problem, such as the COVID-19. But back in 2015, we had earlier work focused on mapping the mobility patterns through social media data, such as Twitter, to understand the people interactions across the scales. That was serving the purpose of mapping flu spread. And similarly, this approach is adopted to map the spread of COVID-19. But even more challenging from this project, it's Belmont funded in partnership with NSF. We're looking at what we refer to be the metabolism of urban systems. And we understand in large metropolitan areas, you have large population and you have energy consumptions and food consumptions. This sort of in a sense complex system increasingly getting instrumented with massive amounts of geospatial data available to help optimize the system performance, urban system performance, but also understand the complexity of such systems. And this has to do with also inputs from decision makers and the stakeholders. For such a complex system, how could you even unpack the interconnections of the components in the system? And certainly, geospatial data and AI have important roles to play to understand the dynamics of such systems as we have more data becoming available. But solving complex problems, as I was using this urban metabolism example, is certainly representing cutting-edge research, but at the same time posing challenges to workforce development today. Our education systems are not quite up to date to help students and learners to quickly grapple with what's happening in AI, in data science, and particularly as AI data science are connected to specific domain applications. And we recognize this challenge, and this is an example focused on reproducible problem solving with CyberGIS and Geospatial Data Science funded by NSF in partnership with two academic professional society organizations, AAG and UCGIS. And it's hard to believe this was last summer. And now it's a pretty luxury thing to imagine how these people would get together. So now if we look at that three-dimensional convolutional neural network, in many ways, this is a black box. And for those of us working in this domain, we know how tricky, in many cases, getting the parameters right and getting the samples right, getting all these, parameters configured in a perfect way, getting the perfect performance. And then you get the results published. So in several dimensions, this is a black box. So the question is also how do you get this black box to even a problem already existing there as a digital divide between the high performance data intensive world as well as many scientists that are engaging CyberGIS and the GIS. They're not so familiar with what's available on the right side. So technical development work in this context, addressing this digital divide and black box, is a project called CyberGIS Jupiter. That's a marriage between CyberGIS Jupiter Notebook to enable reproducible and scalable geospatial analytics. So the idea here is you get access to your Jupiter notebooks as you are a user of the notebook, but on the right side you have CyberGIS infrastructure, and in the middle you have CyberGIS libraries. Embedded in the Jupyter Notebook environment, you don't even know or need to recognize the existence of CyberGIS. CyberGIS is sort of baked in this environment for you to do your geospatial work. And we take such CyberGIS Jupyter notebooks and prototyped a platform where diverse communities could share their CyberGIS Jupyter notebooks and associated data sets for reproducible and scalable work, because such notebooks provide sort of the building blocks of knowledge nuggets, and many of them are interconnected, and this environment is in the process of sorting out how to make such connections and interdependencies among the notebooks accessible to communities and for searching and for knowledge discovery. But at the same time, of course, to open up the black box so that published work or frontier research could be accessible to peers as well as to educational environments. So that was a picture I thought it would be cool to share because after a week of summer school last year, folks were so animated and excited, and half of them actually did not know Jupyter Notebooks before they came, but in the end, everybody in the summer school was able to create and make a CyberGIS Jupyter Notebook work. So that's one reason why they are excited as they were captured in this picture. But the vision is really summarized here. It's using the same slide at the beginning for sharing with you the outline of my talk. We clearly see from a variety of computation data intensive applications and sciences, the critical spatial thinking is important to guide the innovation, guide the understanding of the requirements from such applications and sciences. And of course, as technologies are changing and advancing so dramatically, we would have an opportunity to understand the digital transformation happening from bottom up across these 4 knowledge domains, as I was sharing with you today. And my take-home message is the integration and the synthesis across these knowledge domains through the examples I mentioned today on the right side of the slide are critical. And not only we would pursue frontier research through such integration and synthesis approach, but also we have to bring the workforce along, the future generation, to be able to work on such integration and synthesis and to be equipped to contribute to the broader ecosystem for making exciting sciences happen, because these kinds of sciences are directly related to our real world in terms of solving sustainability challenges, food security challenges, public health challenges. So these are kinds of sciences we need to have credible results and reproducibility to make sure science is trusted by the society to make a difference. So I want to acknowledge multiple agencies, in particular NSF, through their multi-year support for nurturing our communities. I'm here presenting the work really is done by not only my group members, but also contributed by a broader community, in fact, from a number of domains. So I'll stop here and would be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thanks, Shaowen. We have about 15 minutes before our break that we can answer, that we can take questions. Does anyone have any questions to ask? One of the things we're struggling is strong. One of the challenges we have as we look ahead to the different sources of data where we want to extract knowledge from different sources of data that have different modalities, different velocities, different characteristics. They're not structured data like we would normally have in simulation data. Mm-hmm. Is developing tools to integrate these things together, because ultimately we want to extract knowledge, in a very broad sense. In your community, is that a challenge that you have? And are you thinking, it's a challenge I know you've had. How have you overcome it, and what do you still need to do?
That's a great question, because as you rightly pointed out, the challenge of data integration, especially integration across a variety of data sources, it's a challenge in the GIS community for a long time. That's in fact how GIS was created, because if you look at paper map, it's oftentimes multiple themes packed into a paper map. Now for GIS, was initially created to be able to have this layers of view that was a concept initially developed, in fact, by a landscape architect to facilitate the integration of the data sources. But I think in the big data AI world today, even though the GIS community has been tackling this data integration challenge, we're now confronted with bigger challenges, which is the data is coming all the time, which is not what conventional GIS is good at, because the data is fast streams, and oftentimes, as I mentioned as part of my talk, the data has both qualitative and quantitative aspects, and has also more clear measurements as well as vague representations, certainly multi-scale in many ways, and multi-resolution. In fact, this I think is the case in astronomy. We have multi-projections. It's coming from 3D globe to 2D representation. That's the conventional GIS approach, right? You look at paper map, you look at flat maps. That's coming with projections, and then there are like at least a few dozens of popular projections people often employ. Now, in the data integration world, at a scale with data streams, how could you reconcile this without necessarily posing problems or uncertainties as you do it? So I think it's a bigger challenge than what the GIS folks used to be dealing with. And I would say we need innovation at the infrastructure level. We even need new concepts to be able to represent this integration now at a different at the different levels of application requirements as well as conceptual linkages. But we certainly need new use cases to drive this innovation. But importantly, we need much improved scalability, because a lot of cases people just say, I'm not going to try because the problem is too big for me, the data is too big for me, and I don't know how to work with the most cutting edge infrastructure to do my job, and then I better start with a toy example. That's it.
I come from a very traditional modeling and simulation driven community. Very big, we're interested in very big scale simulations. And as we're turning towards this AI focus, I'm interested in the GIS community. Can you tell me what aspects of the computer architecture are most important to you? So in my field, we're interested in deploying something that's usable to everyone. But as we look at these new communities, particularly GIS, you have unique requirements that we've not thought about. So can you articulate what about a big machine that NCSA might deploy or that we might deploy in the Department of Energy? What are the most important components to you?
That's a great question. So I'm glad I shared the example of the virtual Roger or Roger supercomputer experience. So from that experience, I could tell you the importance of in situ analytics, in situ workflows, meaning because beyond our traditional simulation work, now we're dealing with just a sophisticated workflow, not only including simulation, but also including AI components and data analytics. So this is sort of mapping such hybrid modalities of different computing resource needs into a computer architecture. So I would tend to think we need a hybrid computer architecture, even more hybrid than just a GPU and CPU coupling. So that's, I think, one requirement that might not be there in the traditional simulation HPC context. Another important consideration and requirement from the GIS related community work is interactive computing. And then people are getting so used to exploration-based scientific problem solving. You get the data, you map it, you run analytics, you expect to get feedback, and you recompose your analysis to do another way of your workflows. As you know, this is typically not what today's supercomputers style. So the question is, how do we hook that supercomputer to maybe cloud modality to be able to enable such interactive computing. So that would be another, I think, requirement, not necessarily currently is a mainstream in the supercomputing or the most fastest supercomputer architecture.
Yeah, we definitely don't think about it. You can do interactive so long as you ask for it from the batch scheduler.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
we're interested in packing as much on the machine as possible.
Right.
Are there other questions?
I have a question, and this is related to any opportunities that you have explored, Shaowen, related to translational research for the different technologies that are emerging. Have you explored any potential collaborations with, for example, other communities that are facing the same situation with torrents of data that they need to deal with, like, for example, Phil works with similar problems in high energy physics. In astronomy, we have these disparate data sets as well that we need to fuse and rapidly process to extract any knowledge from them. And the goal of the invitation is to also let you know that we're facing similar problems. Mm-hmm. So this could be, a potential collaboration going forward to try to cross-pollinate the tools, the experiences that we have gathered over the last few years, and see how this can also benefit the work that you are leading.
Thank you, Elio. In fact, I view a good part of my work is a translator, because that's really important in GIS related domains. You probably recognize there are so many different domains are using GIS. I mean, this is from environmental science, geography is where coming from, agriculture, urban planning, forest, public health. I mean, this is a long list. And the social sciences, from sociology and others, demography and so on. So what I always see is, a lot of these domains, they're coming at different stages, but they're facing on the sort of cyber infrastructure AI side similar problems. I would say we are having a major opportunity. I would even relate, for instance, astronomy and the GIS in a similar way, because we're all dealing with the space and time. And our space and time is certainly very different than the sky and the stars. But fundamentally, if I tell you data structures like R tree, you probably know what that is, right? Or quad tree. So the way we partition space, the way we organize space, the scale, representation, and so on, the data structure, all actually have similarities. And of course, the techniques involved to represent space in AI algorithms and infrastructure, there are also similarities. So that's yet another way of looking at cross-pollination. But even from those domains connected to GIS, I see huge opportunities to translate the knowledge learned from one domain to other related domains, simply because the domains are advancing at a different pace and at different stages. But there are common learning and common knowledge that could be passed along, so that the communities maybe coming from behind could quickly catch up and make their contributions and their own innovations that would be beneficial to broader communities.
Right. So let me just mention to you what I told Paul, that just to further explore these opportunities, tomorrow we are going to have a brief discussion from 9 to 11 our time about how we can actually join forces to bring all this expertise, all this knowledge, the wisdom that has been acquired about common challenges, and try to push forward for the creation of Harnessing the Data Revolution Institute. And NSF is very interested in seeing how what we are doing for astronomy and physics can be applied also to geosciences. Mm-hmm. So if you can join us tomorrow with Paul and others that are interested, then we're going to talk about how we can actually make this happen. how cross-pollination can accelerate breakthroughs in our disparate domains.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll be happy to participate. Could you send me the Zoom link, perhaps?
It's the same.
Oh, it's the same. Okay. Yeah, I'll join for the first half hour. I have another meeting starting from 9:30. But you said you'll start at 9, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll join you at 9.
Okay, great.
With that, Elio, I think we're on a break until 3 o'clock Central Time. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Thank you, Shaowen. I found it a very interesting talk.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Elio. Nice talking to you folks. Have fun for the rest of the conference.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.